Hello, and welcome to the July 27th, 2022 meeting of the Oak Grove Community Council. My name is Joseph Edge. I'm the chair, and I'll be leading us through the meeting tonight. And we have kind of a quick meeting. Our featured presentation will be from Neil Schulman of the North Clackamas Watershed Council. And first of all, I'd like to invite our board members in attendance to introduce themselves. So again, my name is Joseph Edge. I'm the chair, and I live in the River Forest neighborhood. Valerie, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Valerie Chapman, and I live on Evergreen, just a block away from the trolley trail.
Rich?
I'm Rich Nippon. I live 3 blocks about due south of the Fred Meyers and Oak Grove Boulevard.
Jane?
Hi, Jane Civiletti. I live on Fair Oaks Avenue, and I'm the treasurer.
Thank you. And we'll just go ahead and go through introductions now. And introductions help us do capture attendance so that we can keep track of, voting membership. So we'll ask you to, as I say your screen name in Zoom, please answer with your first and last name and the name of the street that you live on so that we can get you for attendance. And then when you're done speaking, please remember to mute your microphone and keep it muted unless you have the floor. So first off, Tom Hammond.
Tom and Jolene Hammond. We live on Viewcrest Drive, which is off of Wallace, which is off of Thiessen.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner, local resident on Kronberg Avenue.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor Hunter on Laurie Avenue, just south of Oak Grove Boulevard.
Thank you. Sue Conahan.
Sue Conahan, Parkview Circle.
Tom Civiletti.
Tom Civiletti, Fair Oaks Avenue at Oak Grove Boulevard.
Baldwin.
Baldwin Vanderbilt, Neff Road, 3 doors up from Stringfield Park.
Thank you. Anita.
Missed it there, got it. Okay, Anita Blackmar, live on Fair Oaks Avenue on the same block as Tom and Jane.
Thank you. Dave Doback. You muted yourself there. Dave Doback, if you could unmute and say again, please. Almost. I see you're unmuting, but I think we know who you are. We'll get you caught. If you want to, if there's more than one of you there sharing your connection, just go ahead and chat with Jane and let her know who's there with you, since you're having trouble getting the mute going. Greg, could you introduce yourself, please?
Greg Wennison. I'm on Oak Grove Boulevard between Fair Oaks and Laurie.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Gwen.
I'm Gwen. I live on Evergreen Street, close to the trolley trail.
Thank you. Linda Seals.
Did you say Linda Seals?
I did.
Okay, I am Linda Seals, and I live on Woodland Way, south of Oak Grove Boulevard.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Neil Schulman.
Hello, everyone. I'm Neil Schulman. I'm the executive director of the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. Our office is actually in Milwaukee. Our territory includes all of Oak Grove as well.
Thank you. Good to see you tonight, Neil. Rob Reynolds.
My name is Rob Reynolds. I'm the Republican candidate for House District 41. That's why I'm here.
Thank you. And we got Sue Conahan, Suzanne Wolf.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Suzanne Wolf, and I live 1 block west of McLaughlin Boulevard on East Avenue.
Thank you. And let's see, Tom Civiletti.
You had me. You got me.
I got you. Thanks, Tom. And did we already got Tom Hammond, so okay, perfect. I think that is everybody. If we didn't get you, please send a chat to Jane Civiletti and let her know that we missed you. And get, again, first and last name and name of the street that you reside on. See, so let's see, our secretary is not here tonight, so we won't be doing our report from her, but we will have a report from our treasurer, Jane, who will have an update on our finances as well as Trolley Trail Festival updates. Jane?
Thank you, Joseph. The update on the finances is status quo. Nothing has come in or out. Total remains $1,596.18. That was after our $500 donation. So I will give you a little update on the Trolley Trail Festival. Oak Grove Community Council was one of the event sponsors. I don't know if you could see that. They gave us this nice little plaque. How about if it's going on? We had that to display at our booth. They were very, very appreciative of the $500 that our group contributed to the festival, allowed them to do many things that they were needing money for, shall we say. We were noted as the event sponsor, and I'd like to say that we had a lot of attendees at the festival come to our booth. And one of the things I had in there was an aerial map pinned up on the back of the entire CPO area. And I had stickers and asked people to come in and place a sticker where they lived. There were a lot of people who are members of the community council, and those who live within Oak Grove obviously are members of the council. We had stickers go from everywhere, from Park Avenue all the way down to Neff, and from the river out to Oakfield. So there were a lot of people there. They seemed to really enjoy the event, and we passed out some literature, some information, so they can join us at whatever time they like. And again, the Trolley Trail Festival was very, very grateful for our donation and sponsorship.
That's great. Thanks for that update, Jane. Before we move on, did anyone have any questions about the Trolley Trail Festival or our involvement in the Trolley Trail Festival this year? As Jane said, we did donate $500 to the festival, and so I just wanted to give anybody an opportunity to ask questions about that. Linda.
Were there any photos or videos taken that we can view online of the festival?
I can answer that. Yes, there were. The North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District had shared their photographer with us, and he took 284 photos, and they're great photos. They were downloaded on the Trolley Trail Festival Facebook page. I am planning to also upload them onto the HDOG website, but I have not had the opportunity to do that yet. But you could, or even better yet, I could send you the link for them if you would like me to do that.
That would be wonderful if you could.
Okay, and it's Linda Seals,
Yeah, oh, it's Linda. Well, let me back up. Yeah, my email is linda@poshdesigns.biz.
Linda at Posh, P-O-S-H, design,
Yeah, designs,
designs, as in an S on the end, right?
S-O-N dot B-I-Z.
B-I-Z. Got it. Okay, thank you, Linda. I'll zip that off to you, if not this evening, tomorrow.
Yeah, I could not go this year because I'm taking care of a sister who's very ill, but I'd love to see the pictures.
Sure, sure. You'll enjoy them.
Yeah, Suzanne, if you could share that with us as well, we'd be happy to send that out to our email list.
Oh, okay, very good. I'll do that, Joseph.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Awesome. So I'd like to, at this point, turn it over to Neil Schulman, who is the executive director of the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. He's our featured presenter for tonight, and the board of directors thought to invite Neil to come talk about stormwater because just a couple of months ago we had a pretty significant rainstorm come through, and it's anytime that happens, it just kind of reminds us that it helps to raise awareness about this issue, and it's an ever-evolving area of regulations, and so we want to make sure that we keep track of it basically on an annual basis. So Neil's joining us again tonight to talk about that. And Neil, do we need to? We already do have you as a co-host. Feel free to take it away.
Cool. Thank you, folks. I'm going to share my screen in a moment. I'm going to give you a general quick presentation I have about the council and some of the things that are kind of happening now, just to give you a heads up. But I want to leave as much time for questions and discussion, just because I know some of you already know a bit about what we do and why we do it. Obviously, Joseph is one of our board members, and I do want to leave time for discussion. So I know some of the stormwater questions, I don't have them like in a presentation because I'm not really sure what the exactly what the questions were. And also, to be honest, we've been on grant deadline mode, which nonprofits often are. So I'm going to kind of share a quick presentation, but really I'm looking forward to the discussion. And you should also feel free to interrupt with questions at any time. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen, and hopefully you can all see a picture of a great blue heron. Is that okay?
It looks good.
All right. So North Clackamas Watersheds Council, just as a quick who we are a private nonprofit. Again, our office is in the Milwaukee Presbyterian Church. We're pretty small. There are two of us on staff, myself and Amy Van Riesen, who is our watershed restoration coordinator, who's a fish biologist and manages restoration projects. And then we have a 16-member board, of which Joseph is one, that represent a combination of community members and representatives of various agencies like the City of Milwaukee and Oak Lodge Water Services, that have management authority over a lot of the things that determine watershed health. And that allows us to be kind of the meeting ground, because one of the things we know is that fish and water molecules and invasive plants and birds and people don't follow watershed boundaries they don't follow jurisdictional boundaries. The fish don't care when they cross from the city of Milwaukee into unincorporated Clackamas County into the city of Happy Valley. They go where the habitat's good. And that means we all need to coordinate. So we try and be the meeting ground for that. I'm going to see if I can get this to advance. There we go. So why do we do this? Well, there's really kind of several obvious reasons. A lot of watershed groups, and we're kind of formed in response to declines in salmon populations. And again, kind of saying, hey, salmon go wherever the going is good. So we need that coordination. We need that coordination, and we need a strategy. And the other one is really, there's a lot of things about having healthy streams and healthy watersheds that aren't about fish or salmon, whether it's birds in your backyard or the fact that in addition to being home to salmon and bald eagles, our watersheds are also home to 165,000 humans. And that would make our watershed territory, which includes, again, a little bit, I'll show you that in a moment, the fourth largest city in Oregon, about the same size of the city as Eugene, it's a hair smaller. There's a lot of reasons that what we do is about people, as well as people think of us as fish and streams, but it's really hot this week, in case you hadn't noticed, and it's a lot cooler under a tree. And that's a lot of what we do, is plant them and try and keep them in place. And that has some really significant positive impacts on things like human health and air quality and urban heat island effect and property values, as well as on habitat and stormwater and kind of the kind of saying, kind of things like that. Wetlands can be really effective at doing things like treating wastewater at the fraction of a cost as a conventional wastewater treatment plant. Beavers will happily build them for free, so why pay good money when you can get a rodent to do it? And outdoor, having access to the outdoors really became critical to our health as people during the pandemic, especially, but before that and after, hopefully after that. So this is the territory that we cover, and it includes obviously Oak Grove, and that is part of, so they've got the Kellogg Mount Scott watershed, which starts up, Kellogg Creek starts up in Johnson City, Mount Scott Creek starts up in Happy Valley. They flow into the Willamette at Milwaukee Bay. We've got the River Forest watershed just down in here, and then the Boardman watershed in Jennings Lodge, and Rynearson Creek, which flows in on the edge of Gladstone into the Willamette. And then our territory also does cover the east bank of the Willamette River as well. So it's got a lot of people in it. It's got a lot going on. And it falls into all different couple categories. So the left-hand side was taken at Mount Talbert, which is one of the anchor habitat natural areas in upper Mount Scott Creek. And that picture on the right of the spawning coho was also taken there. And when we do get high water in the Willamette, even though Kellogg Dam is a big barrier that we're trying to work on, the habitat up there in those upper reaches are good enough that when the water gets high enough in the Willamette that an adult salmon can jump Kellogg Dam, we get reports of stuff like this in upper Mount Scott Creek. And Joseph can attest, after the high water on the Willamette recently, that fish were trying to ended up in River Forest Lake as well. So even though we have a lot of the urban impacts, we have a lot of good stuff going on too. The picture on the bottom left here is at the confluence of Boardman Creek and the Willamette, and I'll talk about those kinds of projects later. And then in the thing that we don't usually think about when we think about watersheds is most of what impacts watersheds is not anywhere near the creek. It could be up in the uplands. It could be, in this case, the parking lot of Clackamas Town Center, which was built long before there was any understanding of stormwater, as were a lot of things, and is a big, giant pot of asphalt that does obviously create some problems. And we are here to work with everybody to deal with all of those things as best we can. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So just 3 facts I always kind of like to talk about, just so you get what we got, how we approach things. Again, coho salmon and steelhead have been found spawning east of I-205 in Mount Scott Creek. And again, that means when they can get over Kellogg Dam, they can get all the way up there. The other one is by 2040, depending on, there's going to be something along the lines of 60,000 more people living in the urban portion of unincorporated Clackamas County. And all of those people are going to need a place to live, and they are going to also probably, at least a large portion of them, are going to drive cars, and those cars are eventually going to leak oil, and there's rain that's going to fall on their roof. And really what that means is we have to find ways to incorporate the need for more people into the fact that we also need more green infrastructure to manage the stormwater that I'm sure we're going to talk about more specifically. And that is kind of the task in front of us. And part of that is that when you take an area and you pave 75% of an area, more than half of the rain runs along the surface instead of seeping into the ground. And what happens when that happens is you get more flooding, you get less groundwater recharge, the water table drops, you have less water in the creeks flow late in the summer. You have more problems with pollution that water running along the surface grabs, like whatever leaks out of someone's car or off your lawn or things like that. So really a lot of the issues that we deal with are related to impervious surface and kind of what we call non-point source pollution. It doesn't come out of a pipe, it doesn't come out of a factory. It's what you put on your lawn and it's what leaks out of someone's car and things like that. So what do we do as a small nonprofit? We do a lot of habitat restoration work on multiple scales. We do a lot of education work, and part of that is talking to groups like this, but we also have been doing a series of online workshops and how watersheds function. A big part of our priorities right now is removing Kellogg Dam, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then we do a lot of science and policy, and really trying to figure out if we're going to do all these things, where are the best places to do them and how do we do them and how do we understand what's going on? So Kellogg Dam has been in the news a lot lately because removing it has a lot of momentum right now. And we're obviously delighted by that. And my big project before I got on this call and for the next couple of weeks is we are writing a big federal grant to try and get removed. So Kellogg Dam is in Milwaukee Bay Park. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, I'm sure you all are. It was built when the guy on the right was a congressman thinking about running for Senate, let alone being president. So before Oregon was a state, and the dam was built in 1858 for a flour mill. That flour mill stopped operating in 1890, and the guy who ran it, Mr. Kellogg, kind of basically walked away. And it's an earthen dam encased by concrete. And in the 1930s, we didn't really know a whole lot better then when the New Deal was going on and a lot of roads were being built. Highway 9090 was built right on top of the dam. And that is the only reason it's still in place, is because that just makes removing it more complicated. The bridge also needs to be replaced. It's 90 years old. It's considered earthquake vulnerable. And I don't like driving over it every day, but so I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The problems that Kellogg Dam creates is really twofold. So, or more than that. One of them is this is kind of a quasi fish eye view. If you are a salmon and you are, regardless of, let's say you're a juvenile salmon, maybe the size of my biggest finger, and you were spawned in the Clackamas or the Mackenzie or the Santiam or the Malala, wherever, you're migrating out to sea. These fish need places to rest and rear. They live in the lower, traditionally would rear in the lower Willamette, and go up these side creeks where they would eat and get out of the strong winter current in the Willamette, and eat bugs and get big and strong before they go out in the ocean. As you've obviously the lower Willamette has seen a lot of impacts, i.e. downtown Portland. So a lot of the rearing habitat that we can use to sustain salmon are in these side tributaries like Kellogg Creek and Rynearson Creek in Gladstone, lower Boardman Creek, lower River Forest Creek. When they took out Rynearson Dam in 2017, there were 500 juvenile Chinook in that lower reach the next winter. They basically, as soon as they could get in there, they did. The other problem it creates is there's a big impoundment behind it. And that impoundment is great if you're a carp or some other kind of annoying invasive fish, but it really should be a stream habitat that's got a natural channel in it, not kind of a big, kind of somewhat algae heavy lake that's too warm. So there's a lot of reasons to remove the dam, in addition to the fact that the bridge isn't earthquake safe and we have an opportunity to do it. A couple of other things about Kellogg. Obviously, we mentioned this picture on the upper left. We talked about the high water. This was taken in June when the water got really high with the entire dam underwater. So we're about to start a fish study in the lake anyway, and we are now very curious to find out what made it up there when the dam was underwater. Because it was underwater for about 4 days. And that's, again, giving fish access to what they should have access to year round. We have been working with the city of Milwaukee and the Oregon Department of Transportation that owns the dam. City of Milwaukee owns the lake bed. And also a whole host of other organizations, NCPRD, American Rivers, Native Fish Society, and Clackamas Water Environment Services. There's kind of a whole group of partners that has been working to move the design forward. Where should the channel go when the bridge is replaced? How wide does the replacement bridge need to be? What's the channel slope going to be? What happens to the sediment behind the dam? There's all kinds of questions. The guy on the right is one of the long-standing advocates for removing Kellogg Dam. That's Milwaukee Mayor Mark Gamba. The guy on the left is also one of the long-standing advocates for removing the dam. That's Senator Jeff Merkley. And he came out to the site a couple of months ago, been able to help us secure a little bit of funding for the design process. And the grant that I'm writing right now that is taking up most of my time is a much larger grant to get us into the construction phase. Obviously, the challenge of a big project like this, when you have to replace a highway bridge, is it's expensive. The good news is there's a lot of infrastructure money right now. And in addition to upgrading our infrastructure and restoring fish passage and getting a new natural area where the lake bed is, it is a job creating project because we're doing a lot of construction, or hopefully will be. So that's a little bit about Kellogg Dam. The restoration program that we have is kind of twofold. One of them is we work with a lot of individual landowners who have streamside property to plant vegetation on the banks of the stream. That serves multiple purposes. It holds the stream banks, it creates erosion. Most importantly, it creates shade that keeps the water cool. Also, obviously, controls the spread of invasive species and provides habitat for birds. And as the trees grow up, they will often drop sticks and logs into the stream, which are actually really important to stream health. And we work on about 163 sites. And again, these are mostly, residential properties. There's some commercial properties, things like that around our region. And then we do habitat restoration of a different scale. We are getting into these bigger projects where we're doing things like reconnecting wetlands, building log jams, because again, logs are a natural part of our stream. They create really important stream infrastructure. They reduce flooding and erosion. They're critical for salmon rearing. This is obviously not small scale restoration when you're talking about bringing an excavator in and bringing in logs and building log jams, but that's really much larger scale restoration that we're getting into. And we do also have volunteer work parties as well. Those are relative starting up again now after obviously a bit of a hiatus during COVID. But that's how kind of on the larger scale restoration, like here's an example of kind of one project that we're working toward. This is where the River Forest Creek hits the Willamette River. So just north of, or just upstream about a block or so from the Oak Grove boat ramp. Where that's, again, if you're a juvenile salmon looking to rear, that's a great spot. You can duck out of the main channel. It's relatively low gradient. If we could put log jams and pools in there, that's going to be really valuable winter and spring habitat. And that is a project that we're moving toward. And it's actually part of a much larger strategy to do a lot of restoration work on these lower Willamette tributary confluences. And this is bigger than just us, but we're also trying to design a project at the Boardman confluence. There's a project being designed at Milwaukee Bay and the mouth of Johnson Creek right now. The Reinierson project is complete. The Clackamas River confluence was restored a few years back. So again, there's a very concerted effort by multiple watershed councils to restore these lower Willamette tributaries, especially on the east side of the river, because the water's a little cooler from where the Clackamas comes in. We do a lot of education and outreach and stewardship, everything from native plant sales to workshops and site tours. Those will soon be moving back into the field after being online. And really, again, the premise behind this is most of the things that damage our watershed from a pollution standpoint are not anything that come out of a pipe. It is the result of lots of individual behaviors and how our communities are designed, and whether I wash my car in the street or at a car wash. All of that stuff is cumulative. The other thing that we do is we do advocacy and planning and policy. And I know Commissioner Savas has heard from us a few times, as have other folks. And really, one of the things that we have been working on with the city of Milwaukee, is by way of example, is the proposed tree code. And there will be other policy things that move forward. I know that Wes's stormwater rules and standards is in progress. We've commented on that and those kinds of issues. And a lot of that is going to really be a big factor in the stormwater question that I think is probably what you really want to talk about, which is what do we require of development in, and then how do we handle existing gray infrastructure? And there's plenty of ways to do that. You wouldn't know it by looking at it, but if you were to walk outside of our office and stand in the middle of Lake Road in Milwaukee, that is pervious pavement. They just redid it. When it rains, the water doesn't run off the surface and take the motor oil toward the creek. It actually soaks through the pavement into the soil and gets clean that way. So that, those sorts of tactics can be written into code and plans and things like that. The other thing that we're doing is a lot of science and planning. So literally last week, our board approved our 10-year restoration strategy, the North Clackamas Watersheds Action Plan. It's a plan not just for our council, but really it's a statement of these are the top priorities to restore our watersheds for the next 10 years. Some of them are the things we will do, but some of them are the things that we also hope the Clackamas County or the city of Milwaukee or the city of Gladstone or Oak Lodge Water Services or fill in the blank will take on, things that are under their jurisdiction or that they have authority to do. And it ranges from things like how do we connect wildlife habitat across our region, to how do we tackle stormwater, what are the barriers to fish passage that we need to restore, what areas of our region, again, thinking about the humans, not just the fish, don't have very good access to nature, and what do we do about that? The other things we are doing is on science-wise, we have 3 research projects underway right now that Amy is managing. One of them is a temperature, and this is Todd Alsbury, some of you know, is a fish biologist. He's the guy standing there holding the temperature probe. We just put about 26 water temperature probes in our various creeks and our watersheds that record the temperature every 30 minutes. And we're going to be able to determine really where the most important sources of cold water are, so we can really restore and protect those areas. That study's never been done. The other one on the upper right, a view from outside of a culvert, is we are going to be this summer. We are going to be doing summer and fall, going to be doing a barrier study to really characterize there's a bunch of fish passage barriers that have been noted that we know they exist, but no one's actually ever recorded, like, are they a barrier to juvenile salmon or just juveniles or adults, or what year, or what, year round, or only during low water. And then the third thing is we are going to be using some cutting edge technology called eDNA, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, to assess the use of different parts of Kellogg Mount Scott watershed by fish. And you could do that just by basically taking water samples and looking for slices of DNA from, coho salmon or steelhead or cutthroat trout and lamprey and things like that, and find out who's going where. And again, with Kellogg Dam having been underwater for a few days, that something, during the fall Chinook round, I'm curious what got up there, or spring Chinook round, sorry. If you want to get involved with what we do, which I always encourage you, there's a couple ways you can plug in. One of them is, the biggest thing is, we're slowly getting better at kind of sending out regular newsletters over email. We've been so swamped, it's been challenging. We do have some volunteer opportunities, and then in a lot of ways, the biggest ways that we can volunteer is actually to use our voice as well as our hands. And that really came into force recently with that fence issue down by River Villa Park, where somebody built a fence into the Willamette and cut off the access to the public right of way. And that got prioritized for DSL because they got a lot of responses from neighbors about it. And we are a nonprofit. We do need money to keep running, and individual contributions are really valued, because unlike grant money, they don't come with, oh, you can only use this to buy this thing during this window. Individual donations are by far the most flexible funds we have. So that's the quick lightning fast rundown on what we are doing, but I'm going to stop the screen share and just kind of see what questions people have. I know I can probably guess that, when if there's a questions about high water, about stormwater, we can go there, but yeah, I can't, it looks like I see Anada and Jane, and I'm not sure who raised their hand first, but go for it.
I think I saw Anada first, so go ahead, Anada.
Yes, the Watersheds Council partnered with NCPRD and the Friends of River Villa Park not too long ago. And your colleague Amy was there, and she said that there was a possibility of getting some grants to do some habitat restoration at River Villa Park. And I meant to get back to her. She was on vacation for a while, and then other things came up, so I didn't get back to her. Do you know anything about grant proposals related to River Villa Park, which is in Oak Grove?
Yeah, we talked about that today, actually. So the general concept that we're moving toward, and this still has to go through NCPRD's kind of like, is this kind of what would this look like, and what would we want, would be in the area of, if you're in the kind of downstream side of River Villa Park, where where it kind of curves into that kind of beachy cove area right upstream of the railroad trestle.
Mm-hmm.
That is the main habitat area that we're looking at. And one of the things that kind of comes together that there relatively well is that juvenile salmon really like kind of sandy beach areas, and so do humans, especially. But it's pretty compatible, because the juvenile salmon like them in the winter, and the humans like them in the summer. So they don't get in each other's way too much. But part of what the concept there would be to really basically enhance that area, to actually scrape back some of the bedrock that has been carved out by really high flows in the Willamette, and basically build out the beach, and then put a couple of high water log jams on the upper part of the beach that would be wintering habitat and complexity. The cost of that is not particularly small, but we are kind of developing a strat. What we talked about today, basically, without kind of going too much into it, is to see if over the next 6 to 8 months, we can raise money for the design process to do that, to design that, get it basically to what we would call 65% design. And come up, and then we would obviously have to track down some more money to actually do the construction. But that's the concept. And one of the things we heard loud and clear from NCPRD, which we agree with as well, is there's a lot of outreach and communication that would have to happen in the design process, because obviously the park users are going to have things to say. And then the people like me who launch kayaks from there after work want to know if there's going to be improved kayak access, or, and there's lots of fishermen that use the site and that sort of thing. So,
Right. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much for the update.
Jane, you were up next.
Yes, and Neil, I was curious about the fish finding their way into habitat and streams where they had not been previously. I understand that fish like salmonoids come up to spawn, and they generally will spawn in areas where they were hatched, is what I've been told. So if there's a new area opened and that's where you find fish going to spawn, can you explain how, if you understand the dynamic of why they would go to an area where they were not originally hatched?
I can try. This is where I would ordinarily look at Amy and say, hey, Amy, you're the fish biologist. But I mean, so salmon find their way around, salmon and steelhead find their way around by smell. And they tend to go back to their natal streams. But they don't take straight routes, is I think part of what happens. So if you're, let's say you are if you were a especially when we're talking about juvenile salmon of different species, like coho behave differently than Chinook, for instance, but they will go down, let's say you're spawned in the Clackamas, some of them rear in the lower Clackamas, but a lot of them would drop down and rear in the lower Willamette, and basically say, hey, it's warmer here in the winter, we can feed more. And they'll just kind of poke around and go from stream mouth to stream mouth for a couple months at a time, feed, hang out outside the main current. We also know that salmon they tend to spawn relatively close to where they were born, but they're also really opportunistic and resilient. We know that from things like when Mount St. Helens erupted and suddenly the one fork of the Toutle River did not exist anymore. That whole run of salmon just went up the next fork and spawned there. And how they decided to do that I don't know. And we saw the same thing when dams were removed, when Condit Dam was removed on the White Salmon River and the Gorge, Elwha and Vines Canyon Dam were removed on the Olympic Peninsula. There was speculation on how long they thought it would take, and these are dams like, that existed, had no fish passage whatsoever, existed, the Elwha dams were early 1900s, so many generations of salmon that had no experience with that river because they could never get up it. And I remember talking to one of the folks who was involved in that project, and they were saying they were trying to see how long it would take for them to get salmon above the dam site once the dam was removed. And they thought it would probably take maybe a season or two for them to figure out that there was water flowing and, oh, we could go check this out. It took less than 72 hours. And so somehow they knew. I don't know how, but yeah, they figure it out. Generally, it's kind of if the habitat is good. We know they sense things by smell. We know they look for cold water when it gets really hot in the summer. When the Willamette gets really warm, they're looking to get out of the hot water on their return trip. So if they sense cooler water coming out of Kellogg Creek or Rainierson Creek, they're going to go up there when they need a break. Kind of like me in an air conditioning unit on a day like today.
Thank you.
Thanks for that explanation, Neil. That was great. So I have a question. If you one of the things we do with our land use reviews, one of the things that the county looks at is hazards, natural hazards, and the reference map for that is the DGAMI, Department of Geological Minerals and Industries, Bolton 99 map of Clackamas County, which describes all of the different geologic hazards in the area. Underlying Oak Grove, a great deal of Oak Grove is a lot of like seeps and springs. We've got really rocky soils. We've got a lot of seeps and springs here. And that goes really the whole slope from Oakfield Ridge down to the river in a lot of cases. And so I was just wondering, from your perspective, what are kind of the opportunities and challenges associated with a landscape like that when we're talking about stormwater management?
Well, there's an opportunity that's not necessarily immediately related to stormwater management, but is related to, kind of the, I would say, temperature, habitat, and kind of climate resilience, which is those seeps and springs, if we can protect them, are going to be, potential sources of things like late season cool water, which we know is going to become more and more of a problem. As we get, all of the climate modeling is basically saying we are going to have more summer weeks like we're having now, and hopefully not much more, but we are going to have more. And we're going to have more summer drought, and we're going to have big, flashier storms in the winter, big periods of heavier rain. And that is going to, the volume of that relates to the volume of our stormwater system. When you don't have the ability for water to infiltrate on site, when you talk about stormwater, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to intercept and infiltrate. And I'm not a stormwater engineer, but I kind of know the basics here. And we have a stormwater committee that really does know the nitty gritty. But think of where would you go stand during a heavy rainstorm or a light rainstorm? If you stand under a tree, you're probably not going to get very wet. That tree is going to intercept a lot of the stormwater. And then what does hit the ground, we want it to go somewhere other than right down into the stormwater system, pipe system, and into the stream, because that creates that flashiness, that creates a whole bunch of problems like flooding and downcutting. If the soil is kind of close to bedrock with not or really high water table, and that water can't infiltrate, you really have to do a good job of intercepting it somehow. And sometimes that can be into a detention pond before it goes into the stormwater system, or things like bioswales on the street that we saw a picture of earlier, that often really provide an aesthetic function as well. That, they're pretty, you can have plants that attract birds, and, it's a kind of a pleasant part of our infrastructure as well as doing all of that. But part of the layout of Oak Grove, where you have all of this water coming off of Oakfield Ridge and hitting this flat area, there's always going to be water in the winter. And part of what we have done and what we need to figure out is how to give those floodwaters and stormwater a place to go that isn't someone's basement or the intersection of Jennings Avenue that always floods. Because that's why it's going there, is because you've got water coming off of a slope with a lot of floodplain development, and it's coming off really rapidly. One of the most successful projects I've seen in a similar environment is on Johnson Creek. I don't know if some of you have been to a spot that's called the Foster Road floodplain, where basically they took money from FEMA because there had been repeated nuisance flooding. People's houses kept flooding. They managed to finagle the fact they could use the money from FEMA not to rebuild, but to buy them out. And that program could exist in, our neck of the woods as well. and built a wetland natural area, took out the houses, built a wetland natural area that gives Johnson Creek a place to spill out into that isn't people's basements or the road. And when it's not flooded, there's always people walking there, hiking and bird watching and fishing, and it's a really pleasant place as well as far as a public natural area. We're kind of very supportive of what Clackamas Water Environment Services is trying to do at Three Creeks Natural Area, which is to create a similar environment there where Mount Scott Creek can reconnect to its floodplain, and water that is otherwise destined to cause problems downstream can spread out into Three Creeks instead of the creek being deeply entrenched and the water just rocketing along. So looking for places like that, it's a long-winded way of answering Joseph's question, but generally speaking, my always answer to that is you've got to find places where the water can go. You've got to let the creek be a creek, which means having access to its floodplain. And you've got to really do something. And this is expensive, but there's no it's only going to get worse and more expensive, which is we have to find ways to retrofit some of the gray infrastructure that was built pre-1993, which is when we started to have stormwater standards, along places like McLaughlin, where we know there's a ton of asphalt and we've all seen it. And there's really not a whole lot of mechanisms in place right now in Clackamas County that encourage landowners or help landowners do stormwater retrofits. But there should be.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate that. Valerie, I see your hand went up.
Yeah, great presentation, Neil. I have questions. Are there, what things can homeowners do that can be helpful in this project? Is there a list of things or some things, other than really expensive things, are there some things that we can do as homeowners? And, I was thinking that when all that water was falling, I know I had a conversation with my friend Jane Civiletti, who was telling me about their boulevard being flooded. And so what kind of things can we do that can be helpful?
For most people, it's hard to answer that question without having seen anyone's individual property. But what I always start with is use less lawn chemicals, because those go somewhere when it rains. And that somewhere eventually will send them to the creek. And they're not very helpful in there. The other one is, if you can do it and get it far enough away from your house, which is usually depending on the soil and where your house is situated, disconnect your downspout. So that all that water from your roof, instead of going into the storm system and eventually into the creek and into this whole this kind of rocketing down into the creek mode, can spread out onto your flower garden and seep into the soil off of your roof. Or you could even put it in a rain barrel and save it for when you need it to put it on your garden in July. But disconnecting your roof from the downspout system is another one. The other thing that I always tell people is, don't underestimate the role of native plantings in your yard for wildlife. Though, even if you have a small lot that's nowhere near a creek and not next to a natural area, wildlife moves around and they need to be able to come by your place for a snack at some point. And places to live, and urban wildlife is pretty adept at making do with small patches of habitat. And if we can connect enough of those, especially for things like birds that can fly over roads, that makes a huge difference. So planting native plants that are good plants for wildlife is another thing that you can do on your property. some of the issues, there are some issues that we can't solve without working together, which is where groups like this come in, which is, you know, we do need better policies, I think. And I'm not just saying this because Commissioner Savas is on the call, though he's probably heard me say this before, to address flooding. Because if your property is flooding, that's not something you can solve on your property. That's a problem coming from upstream. So we all need plans to work together to really mitigate those things and figure out how to manage them.
Thank you. I would just really quickly, rain chains, are they good ways to manage water as opposed to just a downspout?
A rain chain?
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what those are. Is that, maybe I know them by a different term.
Well, there's not a downspout.
It's like a downspout alternative.
It's a chain.
Yeah, it's kind of like an aesthetically pleasing downspout alternative.
Gotcha. Yeah, the main thing is, I mean, the aesthetics of those are great. The main thing is just making sure that the water doesn't go into a pipe, that it actually goes onto your lawn or some, you know, into a planter or, you know, something like that, rather than into the storm system.
Okay, well, thank you. Again, I was thinking, I won't start using chemicals on my lawn, which I've never used, just so I can say that I stopped doing it. But, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like smoking. I'm not going to start, so I can't brag about stopping quitting. Yeah. Rob, I think you were trying to get in there, right?
Yeah, I just had a curious question about, you'd mentioned you work with the city of Milwaukee on their tree policy, and their policy is pushing for 80% cover from trees in the city. And I haven't been able to get an answer out of them.
40%.
40%, yeah.
40%.
Yeah, okay. Even 40% coverage. How would you get 40% coverage in a city? Where did they come up with the number of 40% coverage?
There's a whole process that I can't fully describe that got them to 40%, but basically looking at the amount of trees that you need to do a couple of different things, really 3 of them. And this is a question the city can describe their process for arriving at that.
They couldn't. That's why I was asking you. They couldn't give you an answer. And so you're on here, so I figured I'd ask you. And maybe since you said,
yeah. So the one of the goals, obviously, is to provide a reduction of the urban heat island effect, and the other and stormwater interception. The other goal was to really look at which areas don't have a lot of, you know, there's certain sectors of the city that have more trees than others. Those tend to follow economic lines, as everybody kind of knows when you talk about a leafy neighborhood. So I think trying to get trees planted in those low canopy areas is another goal. But there's a lot of literature done elsewhere in the Northwest, as well as elsewhere in the country, that really says, hey, when you can get to 40%, you are really hedging on that urban heat island effect impact. You're really improving air quality, and you're really improving air quality quite a bit. As far as how are they going to get there, there's really kind of not, you really kind of have to do 2 things, and they're not super sophisticated to talk about, but they are challenging to do. One of them is you need to plant a bunch more trees, which we're doing some of, and they're going to be coming up with, I think, a plan in the next hopefully 6 months to a year about where and who's going to plant them, and are we contracting this out, and et cetera, and what species, and what you know, that sort of thing. And this includes both like trees in natural areas and parks, and street trees in the park, and trees in the parking strip, and, you know, those sorts of things. The other part of it is really protecting, and this is frankly where the real most cost-effective method is the best tree is the one that already exists, has already grown good and tall, and is already providing shade. And how do we keep those in place? And so the tree code does have some protections against removing trees that are obviously providing a lot of value now, as long as they're obviously not hazards or things like that. And that applies to both new development and also just existing trees. So, and again, that's kind of fairly common sense as well. If you need more trees, you keep the ones you have and you plant more. There's some opportunities with some to really think, I think, strategically about where they should get planted. Again, not only on by, it's easy to look at an aerial photo and say, these are the areas of town that don't have a lot of trees, but we can also use that to create connectivity for wildlife. We can also use that to look at where there's look at where there's the most air pollution and plant trees in those areas because they do clean the air. So hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Neil. The last thing I was going to throw in there is that because I challenged the city of Milwaukee on this on that particular policy as well in terms of feasibility, and they were able to point to several examples of other cities across the U.S. that do have 40% tree canopy and have achieved that goal. So it is a realistic goal, particularly for a city as low density as Milwaukee. But that was how it was explained to me.
Yeah, the problem was, and the problem is still, is that there's still no explanation of where you get the 40% number from. I mean, other cities do it, but where do you get that number from? That's where no one's going to really answer.
That's a question that obviously we, not being the city of Milwaukee, can't answer for you. But
well, that's why I hope this gentleman could do it because that's his business, but obviously not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought I saw Commissioner Savis come unmuted. Did you have a question or did?
Well, yeah, I just want to just add something. I appreciate your presentation, Neil. And I just want to point out that one of my, I guess, call it a peeve that I've had over the years is how our water agencies, which I've been a part of and part of still today, just to some degree, seem to want to separate the responsibility of best practices and not really incorporating either management or responsibility for storm events. And there's ways of you already touched on it. There's ways of doing it which can increase and benefit the community and the health of the streams and so forth. There's a lot of things we can do that are constructive and we're not necessarily a whole lot of cost. But I'm still, I voiced that when the Oak Lodge Water Services came to the County Commission to become an authority and try to get some integration between the DOTs, ODOT, our DTD, Water Environmental Services, Oak Lodge Water Services for the stormwater aspect or the surface water aspect. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of will to accommodate that. And I really think it's a mutual responsibility. I guess instead of necessarily, I think the best way I try to equate it is, okay, sure, the county, for example, has a certain amount of impervious surface that we can measure. Every property, every homeowner has impervious surface you can measure, which is the rooftops. But I've always tried to express to folks is that the rooftops probably have more square footage of impervious surfaces than the roads do. And so therefore we all have a responsibility. So it's not really, kind of this, right? We're pointing at each other. But I just think I've just always been hoping that there's been more willingness to take advantage of that and work together to bring all those agencies together, pool their resources and make some improvements that will improve habitat, drainage and all those things. But right now, as we continue to densify, we're going to have more impervious surfaces, less tree canopy because of that densification, and we got to prepare for it. So we're way behind, and that's not just Oak Lodge. I'm just really talking about all areas, but the areas we're responsible for right now, that at least I am, is Clackamas County. But
so how can the county help us? How can the county help, Paul? You're clear on the issues. How can it help? How can the county help?
I think if we can really ask our districts, and Water Environmental Services is a district, and so is Oak Lodge Water Services, to come together and have that discussion, have that integration with the DOTs. I've been trying to set that table, but I'm just afraid that now that they become an authority, that, and again, I respect them all. I'm not trying to, point people, But I just think we need to work together, and I'm there to help push that along. But I think we need it from this community as well to make that happen on the Oak Lodge water side.
I think I can kind of chime in with my thoughts as a nonprofit that has no regulatory authority, but tries to work across boundaries. I think inter and intra-governmental coordination on this is absolutely essential. One of the challenges between the county and Oak Lodge is one, but I think the other thing that's really been flagged across, not just really bigger than our region, but you get problems when you separate the floodplain management function and land use functions from the stormwater management functions. Because we have that in a lot of our territory with Happy Valley and West and county planning and so those elements need to talk to each other, because where development goes and where impervious surface goes and stormwater regulations all needs to be a constant communication. I think with the conversation between Oak Lodge, and the county about how stormwater is managed between Oak Lodge and County DTD, yes, that conversation needs to move forward in a way that I think, especially in this low-lying area where, again, the water rockets off Oatfield Ridge, that needs to be a process that gets us to a question of how do we manage not only the stormwater and the flooding. And yes, you're absolutely right, Paul, there are going to be more people living here, but I would also say again that there are ways to do that without a lot of increase in impervious surface, or where you do have increase of impervious surface, using some of the cutting edge technology and design to make sure that stormwater is treated on site. So I often show a picture of two developments that have the same number of units, but vastly different amounts of impervious surface. And again, the street outside of our office now, on Southeast Lake Road, is a case in point that it's made out of pervious pavement, and I guarantee you that almost none of the people driving on it know the difference. But it works.
Thanks for coming in, Neil. Eleanor, I wanted to give you the last question because we're running a little over at this point. But I saw you have your hand raised patiently for a while now. So
thanks, Joseph. Neil, I just want to go back for a moment about the idea of equity and the idea of where tree canopies often are in the wealthier, higher income areas, and that idea of health and air pollution, and that idea of equity in terms of trees, not just for fish, but for humans as well. So I really appreciate you making that comment, and that, do you have any suggestions on how that aspect can be brought forward? Because there are so many different ways, and as you say, so many different jurisdictions between what's the county responsible for, how can the county help us in terms of being responsive to the wishes of the residents in this area of wanting to participate and help with this stormwater, floodplain, all those different issues. Do you have any suggestions on how, you're working on a federal grant, how can that equity, justice, health issue be woven into the fabric of the things that you're working on?
There's a couple of different things that we're looking at, but on the subject of urban canopy, and I do have the answer to Rob's question, by the way, the city of Milwaukee basically did a pretty good job of mapping the intersection between who has tree cover, where's the highest burden in terms of bad air quality, and income, and where are the low income populations. And they did it by census tract. They worked with Professor Shandas at Portland State University. You can go on the city of Milwaukee's website and click on a census tract and say, okay, where is their low canopy? Where is their high pollution? Where are the low income census tracts? And where's the racial and ethnic diversity? And I think there's a couple of other factors in there as well. I don't remember, but those are the big ones that I pay attention to. And that's a pretty easy way of targeting where to plant trees. Plant trees where there's not a lot of trees and there's people of low income and bad air quality. Okay, go there first. That is for the city, limited to, that project was done by the city. It's limited to the city of Milwaukee, but there's no reason that data is probably available for everywhere. Because it's census data and aerial photo data. And then you can also overlay that a little bit if you wanted with land use and say basically, okay, where are there any kind of land use tools that protect vegetative buffers? And if not, should there be, or, what do we do with different types of zoning? That's a pretty straightforward way of thinking about it. But the other thing that I think about when I think about these kind of government processes is really who's at the table when these discussions are taking place. And we had I think we all need to do a better job, and our council needs to do this too, of really making sure that we have diverse voices when we're having these conversations, because we know who usually shows up. To go back to the answer of Rob's question, it looks like where I suspect that 40% came from is basically that is the amount of canopy coverage that seems to be needed to maximize the cooling effective trees on an urban city block. So that's that maximum cooling effect.
Thank you.
Looks like it was done anyway. That's what I got on a very quick Google search.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for looking that up, Neil. Appreciate that. Okay, well, great. I think we'll let you go now, Neil. We've kept you longer than I had planned, but I super appreciate you sticking around and answering all the questions. It's been really helpful. And we look forward to seeing you when you come back.
Keep up the good work, Neil. Thank you.
Okay, so then I'm going to share my screen really quick, and there's just a few more things to report on before I let everybody go. We haven't had too much land use application activity recently, but there were a couple things that came in earlier this week. So I don't have slides for these, but I just wanted to highlight that they're coming. The first one was pretty straightforward 2-lot partition right off for a property on Jennings Avenue. And the new property will take access from Jennings Crest Lane or Jennings Crest Court, I think it is. That decision was appealed, and the reason for the appeal given was that the county should require the Jennings Crest Court or Jennings Crest Lane to be paved. But I did see that required as a condition of approval. And so I'm not sure, we need to research this one a little bit more. But the hearing date is August 18th. So what we can do is send out some information about this hearing in our follow-up email so that you guys will have some information about it. And in case there is, a reason to submit comments, we'll make sure that you have the opportunity to do so and know, how to do so and by when. Now, the other one that came through recently, just within the past few days, is non-conforming use modification or alteration for the Oak Lodge Water Services pump station project on Oak Shore Lane. And that was the one that they have to upgrade pursuant to a DEQ order. So, there's really, I don't think we're going to provide a report on this one because non-conforming uses typically, they aren't held to the same standards as anything else around it because they've been there longer than the code applied, and so they're basically held to that standard. So it's not really worth it, I think, to go through the effort on this one, but I at least wanted to let everyone know that it's come through. So if there are any questions about it, please feel free to email contact@oakgrovecpo.org, and I will try to respond to your questions by email. And if there's a substantial number of questions, we'll provide some slides at the next meeting to help explain what's involved with this project. So next thing up is our ABC updates. Rich, do you have anything from CERT? I saw some comments from Greg in the chat about CERT, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to speak about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to bring up what Greg put into the comments, that we are offering classes in CPR, AED, and first aid. They are for a cost, but you do get certified, and they're in the local area. And look in the chat for that information. CERT also did a participation in the trolley trail, and Mark said that we did a great job handling that. Basically, CERT is building up its supplies, building up its radio power, so that in the case of an emergency, we will be available to try to keep in touch with the world. Other than that, we have regular meetings. If you look, probably the easiest place to find us is on Facebook. It's Oak Lodge CERT. And if you're interested in preparation, we do a lot of things with like knowing your neighborhood, things like that. And there are volunteer opportunities. Probably, we're some opportunities for cooling stations this week are probably available. So let us know what you've got and what you need and what you might want from us. That's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Did you have any updates from the CPO Summit?
Not really. The CPO Summit basically met through they call them community leaders, met with the BCC, and basically we got to have a question and answer with the BCC, trying to get some information on preparation for the fire season. This week makes it especially relevant. And the idea is that when we get information, we can bring it back to the board. The community leaders, which is primarily made up of CPO leaders, wants to become a two-way interface between citizens and the BCC, both a way to bring matters that are relevant to us to the BCC, and also take matters that are relevant to the BCC back to communities. We think the CPOs can function as a way to keep in touch with local communities, and hopefully that will work.
Cool, thanks, Rich. Let's see, next up, Suzanne, do you have an update from HDOG this month? You'll need to unmute yourself first. You're still muted, Suzanne.
Okay.
There you go.
Hear me? Okay. And then I don't know if you'll be able to see me. I'm going to bring up our minutes from our last general meeting. And what I would like the members here to know is that HDOG is interested in, with the support of the Oak Grove Community Council, is interested in working with the Economic Development Commission to provide a definition of artisan manufacturing to the Planning and Zoning Division. We would like to also pair that effort with amendments to the restrictive parking requirements that we believe impede our economic success. And so at this time, we, Joseph and I, we have not heard a response from the Economic Development Commission. I will be, now that the Trolley Trail Festival is over, I will be contacting them probably within the next week to see where they're at with considering our request. So that is one thing that is going on with HDOG. And then also too, let's see. Oh yeah, HDOG, now that the Charlie Trail Festival is over, now we're looking at hosting a Halloween event, probably partnering with the church. As you know, they have a new pastor, and so I've yet to meet him, but that will be on the top of my list here within the next week or two to touch base with him about partnering to host an Halloween event for the community. Also too, we're talking about having some kind of Christmas lighting event as well in the month of December. So other than that, oh, one more thing. At the festival, the HDOG booth had a survey, 2 questions in particular. One, though, that had to do with the safety concerns on our streets within the Oak Grove district. And I've yet to look over the pages of responses that we received from at the festival, but there were like 5 or 6 pages of concerns. And so we will be taking a look at the concerns of our residents and businesses regarding the safety of our streets, pertaining to pedestrians as well as cyclists as well as vehicles. And then possibly, if not working with the county, but also working with an organization, a national organization called Smart Growth America. They have a program that supports organizations like ourselves to first create a temporary design that would be then considered later as a permanent structure. But with the idea in mind, with the temporary design that will provide time for the community to experience the change on the street and also receive their input regarding that particular design. So anyway, we've got our work cut out for us as far as looking over the responses from the festival survey that we did. And I see that Mark, you've got the honor, I'm jealous, you've got the honor of sharing with everybody how things went with the festival.
Yeah, I did actually have you on here, Mark, if you wanted to provide a final update from the Charlie Trail Festival, since you were on that committee.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. And thank you, Suzanne. So I think overall, hopefully many of you were able to attend. And I think overall it was a great success. Some of the statistics or measurements of success, are financial and also participation. We had about 60 vendors of both for-profit, nonprofit, and governmental agencies that were there. We had planned for a total number as a goal of participants or folks who came to the Charlie Trail Fest at around 2,000. The person who was in charge of estimating the size of the folks that came estimated the crowd to be over 5,000 between the hours of 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock. So from the measurement of how many people actually came, it was many more than we expected. And that was felt in many ways as far as like the amount of food that was available to people, the amount of water that we served and things like that. So everyone, we were very fortunate that that day it was quite a lot cooler than it has been this week. And so that really worked to our advantage. The other measurement, I think, is community support as far as financial support. And of course, the OGCC provided that $500 seed money to us, which was really the first contribution that was made to the Trolley Trail Fest for this year. And it really set the stage for other folks to provide financial support. And the total amount of financial support that we received from the community, from businesses and individuals, was over $3,500. That made up about 2/3 of the total amount of money that was needed in order to pull it off. And I think what that means to me is that we wouldn't have been able to do that without our sponsors, our community sponsors. And it's something that we feel is really important to continue to do in the future, to encourage and have community sponsors that help us pay for this so that we can keep the event free to all of our citizens who want to come, and also make the fees low as possible for our vendors, both for profit and nonprofit and for governmental agencies, so that we have as much participation as possible. Apart from those statistics, for me personally, I think the thing that I enjoyed the most was the many stories that I heard from people, both vendors and from people who participated, who were seeing each other for the first time in 3 years. I heard stories of people who were seeing neighbors that they haven't seen for years since they were in high school and college. And so that made me really feel even better that this was an opportunity that for all of us to see each other and to talk to each other and get to know each other again. So again, we do plan on having the event again next year. And the committee has kind of slated the date of July 15th, which is the third Saturday in July, to hold the festival again. So we're hopeful that even next year that it will be even better, that we'll make some improvements on the things that we learned from this year. And so I think that's about all. Suzanne, did you have anything else to add to what I've said?
When the committee debriefed yesterday, we talked about for next year closing off Oak Grove Boulevard all the way down to River Road, and then hopefully increasing the number of vendors from the 58 that we have this year to as many as 100 vendors. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention. And then also too, we feel that the attendance of 5,000 people or over 5,000 people, we can attribute that to the few people who are on the festival committee and as well as the HDOG board, who are tech savvy and did an outstanding job with social media. And we also were able to afford to boost some of the posts, which were highly effective, or which was highly effective. And then let's see, CERT has been mentioned. And so you guys did a great job for us and we really appreciated it. So thank you again, Greg. The music was outstanding. We are so lucky to have local live music that certainly drew a crowd throughout the whole day. And then one last thing I need to mention about the photos that North Clackamas Parks and Rec took for us. If you use any of those photos to post on social media, you do need to credit the photographer. And I will, when I send the link to Joseph, I will include the photographer's name so that if that is something that you intend to do, you will have that information. Other than that, there were a lot of happy faces that Saturday, and so it was well worth it. And thank you again to this council for your support.
Great. Thanks a lot, Suzanne. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that turned out really well.
Yes.
Let's see. We are okay. We're way overdue. Let's move on to Anita. A quick update from NCPRD's District Advisory Committee.
Okay, I don't have anything about the DAC, but I'm also on the library board now. And I just want to mention a puzzle, an opportunity for public involvement that I became aware of today. This has to do with ARPA money. Clackamas County has now received the full amount of over $81 million, excuse me. And about half of this money is already set aside for certain things, but the other half is still in play. And Clackamas County currently has 6 major capital projects in the queue: the county courthouse, county fair building, county jail, Gladstone Library, Oak Lodge Library, and the OSU extension and a 4-H service building. And at the Administrator Schmidt's request, project leads, we don't know who the project leads are, project leads participated in a prioritization and readiness exercise to assess and those projects, 6 capital projects, against county criteria for what's most important to put the money towards. And then the scores were added and averaged. And for some reason, and I don't know why, the courthouse got a score of 92, county fair got 70, county jail got 70, Gladstone Library got 65, and the OHSU extension and 4-H building got 64, and the Oak Lodge Library got only 57. And so there's a mystery going on here, and there's an opportunity for the public to get involved, and the more people who say things to the county, the better. And
Thanks for that update. We'll definitely keep track of that.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah,
was there anything else
I have
that you
to
wanted
look
say?
more into it. I will look more into it myself. I wasn't able to go to the meeting today where it was discussed. I don't know, Paul, do you want to say a few things?
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Yeah, I'm a little bit upset, actually. I really question the scoring. I question the criteria that was used and the lack of criteria in certain areas. So I'm going to get to the bottom of that. There's buildings, one of them in particular with the extension building that was proposed to being built. There is a small building there today on Warner Milne Road, has very little traffic. I made the comment today that there's far more traffic at any library, at any one library in Clackamas County than there is at our building right down the street. So I just don't see how, under their criteria of that was there, the libraries have to rank higher, as well as the promises made to the voters when they voted for the library district, when they voted for NCPRD. You know, these districts were voted in with promises made, and those promises need to be kept. I'll just stop there and say, if you get a call from myself or other library advocates at a point in time in the near future to advocate or show up for a meeting, you know, we need to make sure that this is a high priority for all my colleagues on the commission, not just a couple of us. Because we need to get this library across the finish line. That includes the Gladstone Library as well. The Gladstone Library scored higher than the Oak Lodge Library as well. So thanks for bringing that up, Anita.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. And thanks, Anita, for your update. I'll make sure to add you as the library committee so that I can remember to highlight that as when we get to you. Let's see, Heidi, did you have an update from Oak Lodge Water this month that you wanted to share?
No update. Sorry, just listening in on your business. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Just wanted to make sure. So let's see, I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. We've just got a couple more slides to go. So let's see, the update actually from me for the Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee is here on this slide, which is that the Walk Bike Clackamas Advisory Committee recruitment window is now open. And so if you're interested in volunteering for that committee, I know I am, then you know, go ahead and apply to that by August 15th. And there's unfortunately, it's not at the regular link, it's at this other link under the engineering department. So we'll make sure that we get this out so that everyone that is interested has the opportunity to apply for that. The other openings that we have right now are the Committee for Community Involvement, which is open through the 31st, which is just the end of the week. And then the Forest Advisory Board, which is open through the end of next week. Are there any announcements from the floor? None? None. Okay, seeing none, then quick schedule review. We have a board meeting coming up here on Monday, August 1st, and then we'll see you again on August 24th. And there's our schedule through the end of the year and the next couple meetings of the new year. So with that, we're all done for this month. It was great to see everybody again. Thanks for sticking around. Have a great night. Now, Valerie, go ahead and stop recording.
Goodbye. Good night, everybody.